Hi, everyone, and welcome to the CanSIA webinar titled NRCan Update on the International Energy Agency Photovoltaic Power System Program. My name is Wes Johnston. I'm Vice President of CanSIA, and I will be your host today. As of right now, we have about 25, 30 people already on the webinar, which is great. We're expecting anywhere between 50 and 70 today. And we look forward to your participation and questions towards the end of the webinar as well. So as an overview, Natural Resources Canada, in collaboration with CanSIA, will provide an update today on the IEA PVPS program and share information on why it can be valuable for Canadian solar companies to participate in the IEA initiative. Celebrating 25 years of existence, the IEA PVPS has established itself as a reference in terms of independent and unbiased PV research and continues to provide reliable information about the PV market, industry, sustainability, grid integration, building integrated PV, solar resource, and PV in emerging economies. This webinar will present new reports on PV market development, PV performance and failures, grid integration, and more. Also in this presentation, participants will learn about the following. What is the IEA PVPS? Description of project tasks associated with related projects and events. Latest statistics regarding global PV capacities and markets. And why Canadian solar companies should consider joining one or more of the IEA projects. Before getting into the presentation, however, I will cover off a few housekeeping items. So just to start off, all participants will be in mute mode, and after the presentation is complete, we will open up the floor to questions. In order to have your question heard, what I will ask you to do is simply click on the hand icon, which you can see next to your name or very close to your name. And I will call upon you, unmute your line, and then you can go ahead and ask your question. So again, after the presentation, click on the hand symbol, and then I will call upon you to ask your question. Also, for your information, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all attendees afterwards. If you do have any technical or admin-related questions, please use the contact information provided here, and we will deal with your issue at that time. Also, at this time, I would like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Yves Poisson. Dr. Yves Poisson is a PV technology specialist and research manager within Natural Resources Canada's CanMet Energy division since 2002, where he manages a portfolio of R&D and demonstration projects related to solar PV. His current research interests include PV system and module performance assessment, standards development, and the integration of renewables to northern microgrids. He is a member of the ICPV/IEC TC82 Committee on Standard Development for PV Systems and Canada's alternate executive committee member on the IEA PVPS program. Yves lives with his family in a grid-connected solar home close to Montreal and also drives on solar electricity. So he not only talks the talk, he walks the walk. So with that, I will now hand it over to Yves Poisson to start the presentation.
All right. Do you hear me well?
Loud and clear, Yves. Go right
Excellent.
ahead, and you should now be the presenter, I believe.
Okay. So I get to show my screen. Let me just get set up here. I will put myself in presentation mode. Here we are. And I'm going to switch. Yeah, so do you see only one slide?
I currently see the IEA PVPS title slide.
Perfect, so we're all set to go. So thank you for the introduction, Wes. As you mentioned, solar PV is one of the fastest growing energy technology, and getting access to independent and unbiased technical and non-technical PV info is a necessity for those of us who are working in this field. Since its foundation in 1993, the International Energy Agency Technology Collaboration Program on Photovoltaic Power Systems, the IEA PVPS, has established itself as a reference in this area. So in the next 45 minutes, I will present the latest activities and the reports of the IEA PVPS, as well as detail some of its highlights. Speaking of highlights, let's start with a few from Task 1 on strategic analysis and outreach. So, as you can see, at the end of 2017, the cumulative PV capacity reached 402 gigawatts in the world. 25% of this capacity was installed in 2017, mainly in India, in the US, and in China. Actually, China is now leading the growth in solar PV deployment, and I have the perfect example to illustrate this. Traditional leaders in solar PV up to now were the US, Japan, and Germany, who installed an impressive 50 gigawatt cumulative capacity. Well, in only 1 year, in 2017, China installed more capacity than each of these leaders, 53 gigawatts, and that's only in 1 year. So this puts China now well ahead in terms of installed capacity at 131 gigawatts. In terms of energy production, solar PV now accounts for more than 2.1% of the world electricity production. Close to 30 countries produce at least 1% of their electricity using solar PV technology. So as you can see here on the left, Japan, Italy, Greece, Germany produced between 5 to 7, more than 7% of their electricity from PV in 2017, and Honduras even reached more than 13% of its electricity using PV. Canada is more on the left side of the graph. It has not reached yet 1% of its electricity production, but interesting developments are also taking place here. So let's take a closer look to Canada. So in 2017, 246 megawatt was installed, which brought the cumulative capacity to 2,911 megawatts, so pretty close to 3 gigawatts. As you can see, it's mainly large power plants, so maybe two-thirds of the capacity is solar plants, but there's also distributed capacity on houses and buildings as well. That's the orange portion of the graph here. Growth has slowed down in the last 2 years as the Ontario market is transitioning from FIT support to net metering, but Alberta is becoming an important market, growing without much subsidies. And it's now, at the end of 2017, Alberta had installed 40.27 megawatts. So, in this context where solar PV is growing rapidly and gaining market share in the national electricity supply, the objectives of the IEA PVPS aim to facilitate the transition to sustainable energy systems by first supporting PV technology development, analyzing competitive PV markets, supporting the development of an environmentally and economically sustainable PV industry, developing policy recommendations and strategies, and providing impartial and reliable information. So, the IEA PVPS program is one of the collaborative R&D agreements established within the International Energy Agency. It consists of 27 member countries. So you can see the map at the bottom. We welcome Morocco this year, and Chile joined the year before. And in addition to these 27 countries, there's 5 organizations, as the European Commission, Solar Power, Solar Electric Power Association, the Solar Energy Industries Association, and Copper Alliance, for a total of 32 members. The overall program is headed by an executive committee composed of representatives from participating countries and organizations, while the management of individual projects, which are called tasks, is the responsibility of operating agents. In total, 17 tasks have been established since the beginning of the PVPS program, and out of these 17, 8 tasks are currently active. So this slide shows the 8 active tasks. Canada currently participates in Task 1 on strategic PV analysis and outreach, Task 13 on PV performance, quality, and reliability, and Task 15 on acceleration of BIPV. So let's take a closer look at each of these tasks into more detail. So the first task shares a double role of expertise and outreach. It aims at promoting and facilitating the exchange and dissemination of information on technical, economic, environmental, and social aspects of PV systems. So, Task 1 researches market and industry development, analyzes support and R&D policies, and these analyses are detailed in the reports that you see here, the snapshot of global PV report, the trends report, and self-consumption policies. So you see those reports on the right. In recent years, Task 1 has also analyzed business models for residential and commercial buildings, as well as utility business models. So these reports are available from the IEA RETD website. Now, moving from information dissemination to emerging countries, Task 9 deals with the deployment of PV in emerging and developing regions to foster a sustainable economic and social transition process and support regional development. In the current period, the main field of activities of Task 9 are PV mini-grids, deployment strategy for 100% renewables in small island countries, PV-related training, contribution to rural electrification, and standardization bodies. So
Sorry, just for one moment. We have a bit of an echo coming through at this point in time. I'm not sure if you have 2 microphones on by any chance, but if you could maybe just take a quick moment to ensure that your computer microphone is off as well, and that may help us eliminate the echo.
Yeah. Does that work better?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so, eh? Oh, yeah, I had my headphone on. Thank you for bringing that. Okay, so
thanks, Eve.
Keeping going, you're welcome, Wes. So keeping going. So the report that you see here at the bottom left, entitled Guideline to Introducing Quality Renewable Energy Technician Training Program, addresses the need for high-quality technical training for renewable energy practitioners. And while the second report on the right, called the User Guide, this one allows operators to understand if their system is operated in a way that ensures long lifetime. So, for example, to be able to extend the battery lifetime for several years. It gives suggestions on how to act if there are signs of unfavorable use or failure. So that's the main activities of Task 9. Now, moving from emerging countries to environmental and health and safety aspects of solar PV, Task 12 leads activities that are related to this topic. The overall objectives of Task 12 are first to quantify the environmental health and safety profiles of PV in comparison with other technologies, define and address health and safety aspects and sustainable issues are important for market growth. So, for example, it deals with recyclability and with health and safety aspects of PV manufacturing. And finally, it also disseminates the results of these analyses to the different stakeholders through reports and workshops at solar conferences and webinars. So the overall objectives of Task 12 are to look into these environmental health and safety aspects. And the way it does that is by leading the following activities. So the first objective is served with defining material and product recycling issue and with life cycle analyses that describe energy, material, and emission flows in all stages of the life of a PV product. So that's done within studies dealing with the recycling of manufacturing waste and spent modules and doing life cycle assessment of the technology. Second objective is addressed by communicating lessons learned from incidents or potential incidents in production facilities. So that's done through the activity dealing with environmental health and safety in manufacturing facilities. And finally, the third objective, which deals with dissemination, is accomplished by presenting to a broad audience, by producing simple fact sheets and comprehensive reports, and by engaging industry associations and media in the dissemination of the information. One example of a topic that has been studied in a new report is the one on life cycle assessment of current PV module recycling. Recycling of PV modules is not yet a viable business in North America. However, according to this recent report, it suggests that lessons can be learned from the recycling of other electrical waste products, such as LCD panels, due to their sandwich-like structure. So we can learn lessons from the LCD panel recycling activity. So, for example, automated disassembly, cutting attrition system to remove EVA, and dissolution of EVA could be part of an effective crystalline silicon PV recycling process. And one of their conclusions is that adding a recycling fee of $17 per module or $8 per module if the plant is more efficient, that would make the recycling plant cost-effective within a 6-year payback period. So there was actually a workshop held at the last World Conference on solar PV held in Hawaii earlier this year, and the Task 12 representative from NREL was there to propose a roadmap to developing a recycling facility in North America. Currently, there are a number of them in Europe, and First Solar recycles cadmium telluride modules, but North America has yet to get its own recycling facility. So now, this is just a glimpse of the findings presented in this report on life cycle assessment of current PV module recycling. Other recent publications by Task 12 include end-of-life management of PV modules, net energy analysis of PV electricity, and human health risk assessment methods for PV-related fire risks. So, moving now from environmental issues to performance and reliability. So, performance and reliability of PV systems, that's the topic of Task 13. This task contributes to the development of new standards, the accreditation and approval processes for PV systems and components, and it provides objective operational experience of performance and reliability issues related to PV systems. As you can see, Task 13 is divided into 4 subtasks dealing with new module concepts and system designs, also performance of PV systems, a third subtask on monitoring operation and maintenance, and dissemination. So more specifically, subtask 1 includes materials, bifacial modules, new systems designs, service life predictions. Subtask 2 on performance of PV systems includes uncertainty in yield assessments and PV levelized cost of electricity, predictive monitoring, climatic rating, performance loss rate, and soiling and snow losses. Subtask 3 deals with quantification of technical risks, characterization of PV power plants using mobile devices, and guidelines for operation and maintenance procedures in different climates and countries. And finally, dissemination is achieved through workshops, webinars, presentations, and reports. So task 13 is the largest task of PVPS in terms of membership. It includes more than 22 IEA countries, 38 institutions, and 45 participants. Now, the list that you see here, the 11 technical reports, can all be downloaded from the website free of charge. And 3 of these reports were published in the last 12 months. So I won't go into each individual 11 reports, but I will give you a short summary of the 3 latest reports. So let's start with the first one on PV module energy yield measurements, on existing approaches and best practices. So the context is that the assessment of PV module energy yield performance requires knowledge of specific module parameters. However, in this context, to improve the comparability of energy yield measurements, it's essential to agree on the main uncertainty contributions. So it can come from temperature coefficient, spectral response, angular response, nominal power, and so on. So in this context, the report provides an overview of the most important aspects to be considered for the setup of an outdoor test facility. And the end goal is for those that are currently implementing PV module energy yield measurements, test platforms, is to achieve accurate, reliable, and highly comparable data for PV module performance from different test facilities. So if you are interested in PV module measurement monitoring, that's a good report to look into. A second report that I wanted to highlight with you today is one on a review of infrared and electroluminescence imaging for PV field applications. So that report provides a comparison of the relative merits of electroluminescence and infrared imaging techniques. These types of optical measurements, they provide fast, real-time, and high-resolution images with a two-dimensional distribution of the characteristic features of PV modules. So IR imaging measurements of the thermal behaviors of cells in the modules allows a number of defects to be easily and quickly identified. So these include short circuits in solar cells, shunts, inactive cell parts. As you can see here on the slide, there's a broken module in the middle of the image, and this leads to hot spots in the module, hot regions at least, that can be easily detected by infrared imagery. However, not all of the failures of PV modules lead to an increase in temperature. Okay? For example, we have a picture for here at the bottom of the slide that shows an electroluminescence image of a monocrystalline PV module that suffers from potential induced degradation. So although this does not generate heat, we can pick it up using electroluminescence. So taking into account these two types of characterization techniques, we can quickly detect the most common defect in a PV module with good accuracy, and we can get a good indication of the health and reliability of the PV modules in the plant. So if fault detection is a topic of interest, I recommend reading this report on the review of infrared and electroluminescence imaging for PV field applications. The third report that I want to highlight today is the uncertainties in PV system yield predictions and assessments, where the authors provide insights into the field of uncertainties of several technical aspects of PV systems yield prediction and assessment. So this also deals with solar resource uncertainties, PV module properties uncertainties, and those related to PV system output and performance. So the aim here is to standardize the procedure of uncertainty calculation of predicted PV energy yield in order to properly estimate financial investment risks. So these results are a glimpse of the latest results, the latest reports from Task 13 dealing with performance and reliability of PV systems. And if reliability is a topic of interest, I'd like to bring to your attention that the Integrated Committee on Solar Photovoltaic Standards is the committee that maintains and adopts new standards dealing with safety, performance, and other aspects of PV systems and components. The ICPV is composed of the following members that you see listed here, and we are always looking for new members. So if you are interested in getting involved in standard development, please contact me at the end of this webinar. Now, moving to from reliability to high penetration in electricity grids, we get to task 14, which studies the technical challenges associated with high penetrations of solar electricity, especially the effects of its variability with respect to the reliability and stability of electric power systems. More specifically, task 14 aims to discuss the market implications of technical solutions, like advanced inverter functions, for example, for the integration of PV at high penetration levels. It also aims to develop new solutions for operations and grid planning, aims to rethink existing rules of thumb and practices as new smart grid technologies become available. It also finally aims to discuss the possible role of PV in a future smart grid as it may evolve as the PV penetration regime changes. So task 14 has also published 9 publications in the recent years, including one that was published in the last 12 months, dealing with flexible resources for flexible transmission system operation. Sorry. So this report stems from the work of subtask 3 on high penetration solutions for central PV generation scenarios. The large increase, the dramatic increase of PV generation implies several challenges in transmission and distribution system operation. So this report provides a review of present and expected scenarios about flexibility in systems operation, systems that include power systems and markets with PV in them, that also include flexible resources and innovative flexible resources, including demand response and PV output management for system operation. So the report summarizes and integrates results of a survey involving national experts in 6 countries, namely those that are on the table, that's Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Greece, Italy, and Japan. And one of the conclusions of the report is that high reliability of PV forecasts can be achieved in the short term, so 1 hour or less, but not all flexible resources can be activated compatibly with this 1 hour time frame. As a consequence, additional units and faster flexibility resources are needed. So we need to improve the thermal power performance of the existing generators, or we need to install battery energy storage systems to integrate more flexibility on the grid in order to manage those variable resources like wind and solar PV. So that's for high integration of solar PV. And now moving towards building integrated PV. Okay, there's about 1 to 3% of all PV capacity that's installed, which falls under the category of building integrated PV. So this is really a niche market for building integrated products. And the objective of task 15 is to accelerate the penetration of BIPV products in the global market of renewables and level the playing field for BIPV products, building applied PV products, and regular building envelope components, respecting mandatory aesthetic, reliability, and financial aspects. So as such, task 15 is divided in 6 topics dealing with first, project database on building integrated PV projects, business models, standards for building integrated PV products, environmental benefits of BIPV, demonstration projects, and dissemination of the knowledge developed in that subtask. So a few highlights about those subtasks. So subtask A, dealing with the project database, is working on a book that will showcase BIPV installations on residential institutions and commercial buildings. This book will be published in 2019, and it will feature 2 examples from Canada. Next, regarding subtask C on standards, there are currently 3 reports under development, so international definitions of BIPV, analysis of user needs for BIPV and BIPV functions, and the analysis of requirements, specifications, and regulation of BIPV. And in addition to these reports, many Task 15 members are working on the development of an IEC standard, so IEC 63092, which will deal with design qualification and safety aspects of BIPV systems and modules. So amongst the results of Task 15 is there's 2 reports that have been published in the last 12 months. The first one, called BIPV Research Teams and BIPV R&D Facilities, it provides an overview of BIPV R&D teams and test facilities covering the 17 contributing countries, including Canada. So it lists organizations involved in BIPV research dealing with the topics here, so market studies, product development, outdoor testing, social aspects, and so on. And the aim of this report is to facilitate international collaboration on BIPV and to provide relevant contacts for building integrated PV developers. So that's one report. A second report that Task 15 has published recently is this one on transition towards sound BIPV business models. It deals with 2 topics. The first one is an inventory of existing business models and also opportunities and issues for building integrated PV. So the first part points towards a lack of collaboration, higher cost, and an inadapted regulatory environment to explain the challenges related to the creation of BIPV business models. And the second part discusses the key factors for successful building integrated PV installation. And those factors include integrating BIPV early in the design stage, having an owner that's very committed to BIPV, using standard products to limit the customization costs of BIPV components, and also going beyond simple payback to include all the values in the economic analysis. So now, from building integrated PV, we are now going to solar resources, where the main goal of Task 16 are to lower barriers and costs of grid integration of PV, and also lower planning and investment costs for PV by enhancing the quality of forecast and resource assessment. So this task is organized into 3 main technical topics. So subtask 1 deals with current and emerging resource assessment methodologies. And this subtask includes, for example, ground-based methods, numerical weather models, satellite-based methods, and benchmarking framework. The second subtask on enhanced data and bankable products includes data quality and format, merging of satellite, numerical weather models, and ground data, spatio-temporal high variability, and long-term interannual variability. Subtask 3 deals with the evaluation of current and emerging solar forecasting techniques, and it includes value of solar power forecast, regional solar power forecasting, variability forecasting, and probabilistic forecasting. And finally, dissemination and outreach are achieved through the development of task brochures, a newsletter, and webinars or conference presentations at major solar events. And they're also working on the solar resource handbook. So this task started in 2017, so there's no report to bring to your attention right now. And the work plan extends from 2017 to 2020. And finally, the last task, but not the least, is a new one on PV transport that started earlier this year. So the main goal of task 17 is to study the deployment of PV usage in the transport sector in order to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and enhance PV market expansions. So subtask 1 will clarify the potential benefits and requirements for utilizing PV, while subtask 2 will study electric systems using PV-powered onboard vehicles and infrastructure and propose viable business models, including virtual power plants. So based on the results of subtask 1 and 2, subtask 3 will develop a roadmap for the deployment of PV-powered applications in the transport sector, and subtask 4 will disseminate the deliverables via workshops, conferences, and other public events, and link with the automobile, battery, and energy service industries. So this is a new task that started in 2018, and that will extend to 2022. So in summary, the prospects for PV technology and markets are high, although they will vary highly between different regions. Business models, policies, and financing modalities are set to evolve, and in the end, energy system integration requires to address flexibility needs and sharing the responsibilities. So all these aspects are covered in numerous reports. If you'd like to dig deeper into the concepts presented today, I encourage you to take a look at the IEA PVPS website. You can also subscribe to the PVPS newsletter. And as a final word, if you are interested to contribute to some of this work and you can support your own travel and contribution, please contact me and I will give you more details on how to be nominated to the task that interests you. And with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Yves. That presentation was extremely informative, a wealth of information there, and I think you only scratched the surface as well. It seems like there's a lot of information that goes beyond just this webinar with all the different publications and reports that are also underway at the IEA PVPS. At this point in time, we're going to open up the floor to questions. So again, if you do have a question, please just click on the hand icon next to your name, and I will then call upon you, unmute your phone rather, and allow you to ask your question. So certainly please feel free to raise your hand and ask any questions. And maybe in the meantime, Yves, if I could ask, you mentioned how the BIPV publication coming out in 2019, you mentioned that there were going to be 2 case studies from Canada. I was wondering if you could maybe just elaborate just quickly on 2 of those case studies, just to give the audience a sense of where they are and kind of what type of projects they are.
Yes. So the first one is the Camrose building in Alberta. So I believe it's a theater facility that has its 4 walls covered with PV modules. And so it's it's actually building applied PV, but very nicely done with black modules. And so that first system is in Alberta. And a second system is the Harbor Front in Toronto, which is a very nice artistic rendering with solar PV embedded in it. So I don't have more details in mind, but the case study will contain all the details that you may be interested in.
Great. That may be the N-Wave building.
Yeah, the N-Wave. That's correct. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. And one other question that I have as well, Yves, you mentioned that there are a number of opportunities for Canadian companies to get involved in the different tasks. I was wondering if you could just quickly elaborate on some of the time commitments and what can these companies expect in regards to their commitment, but also what they can get out of those different participations.
So on the commitment side, you can expect to work during this 4-year cycle with experts from all around the world in these specific topics. Usually there are about 2 meetings per year at different locations. However, the work can take place in Canada, and if you're not able to travel, you can always forward the results to your subtask leaders. So travel is, let's say, encouraged, but it's not mandatory. And in return, however, you'll be expected to provide work analysis to your specific task. So typically, the implication of members is about 1 person month per year. So you can expect to work on 1 month on a given topic, and sometimes it will have to do with, let's say, filling questionnaires with relevant info from Canada, and then everybody pulls their own information together to develop report on a given topics. So that's the type of implication.
Very good, excellent. And so just last call out to the audience to see if there are any questions. I don't see any hands raised at this point in time. Maybe one last question for you, Yves, then from myself. You did mention the kind of surveys that the IEA does. They do country national surveys, which provides a lot of information. That's where some of the initial capacity market information, I believe, came from. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more information in regards to some of the practical results that come out of these different projects, maybe just to highlight 1 or 2 other ones for the audience, just to share with them some of those practical results in Canada in particular, I guess.
Yes. Well, what could I say? Well, the National Survey Report of PV applications in Canada provide information on the cost, the installed capacity, the amount of economic activity in solar PV in Canada, and then these informations are used by decision makers to develop appropriate policies. So I would say, as an example, that this is it builds the information base upon which relevant policies can be developed for encouraging the development of solar PV in Canada. So that's one example. A second example is the solar PV potential map, which is unfortunately currently down, but we're working to restore it and even improve it. That map of PV potential provides the annual expected electricity production from PV systems installed at different tilts. So that can be, currently it's provided as a function of cities, municipalities throughout Canada. So we have, I think, 3,500 municipalities that are represented in this database, which is taking the form of an Excel spreadsheet for the moment until we fix it. And that PV potential map was developed based on our work with task 2 on reliability and performance of systems. So I know that now it's called task 13, but in a previous generation, a previous cycle, this task 2 dealt with the reliability of systems, and those I would say notions that we got from participants and experts from other countries allowed to Canada to develop a similar tool for Canada. And so those are 2 examples. A third example I could give is the analysis of the building integrated PV potential. in Canada. So there was an article that was written by my colleague Sophie Pellan a number of years ago that used a methodology developed by Task 7 on building integrated PV. And it highlighted the potential that each province and a number of municipalities have just using the building footprint of the city. And the numbers are sometimes quite astounding. There's a lot of potential for PV development out there.
Great, thank you. And I know at CanSIA we have certainly used all of those different publications and resources at one time or another. So certainly they come in handy from an industry perspective. But also, as you mentioned, in terms of educating decision makers on how much solar we can produce in Canada and what is currently being produced in the industry as well. Well, thank you very much, Yves, for this great presentation. We had about 50 people in attendance today, so that's a great participation from the industry. I would like to thank everyone again for participating today. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar with all attendees. We also will be sharing a survey with all attendees afterwards, so please provide your feedback. And if there are other topics that you would like CanSIA and potentially NRCan and the IEA to cover in the future, we would certainly welcome your feedback. Obviously, a lot was covered here today, and that only scratched the surface. So there's a lot more that could be shared as well. So again, Yves, thank you very much for the great presentation, and thank you to all of those that participated on the webinar today and took part. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes. And please feel free to send me questions by email if you have some afterward.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye.